I just don't know where I did wrong, you know? I wasn't here one day, and then suddenly I was. And then all of these people were mad at me. And I don't even know what was going on.
I see. And you've no idea why you're here? No side quest or job quest affiliation?
I mean, the developers made a few remarks on their letter from the producer.
No. Unfortunately, developer lore is quite useless if it's not even in the game they made. A big chunk of what they say live is off the cuff and not even in the books either. I'd never call that reliable lore.
But what? Then what about me? Who am I if I'm not Bahamut?
Oh, you are definitely not Bahamut.
What?
Well, none of you are. Not really. But it's not your fault, Solar Bahamut. Many players are simply upset because they've been asking for different summons for about 10 years, and now they're just getting reskinned summons of what they already had. But the good news is that I'm pretty sure I know where you came from now, and who's to blame.
Really?
Indeed, and I'd be more than happy to explain. This is not Bahamut. This is also not Bahamut. And wouldn't you know it, this is definitely not Bahamut. So what's going on here? Why do all these dragons possess the same name but look so different? And if none of them look like Bahamut, then what did the original Dragon Lord of Miracidia look like? I've been getting this question from a lot of players ever since Dawntrail released, and I figured I might as well explain the history behind the true Bahamut, as well as why the heck Summoner has a creation with swords for wings. So gather around, my friends, as I tell you exactly what's going on with Solar Bahamut. To understand how the Warrior of Light obtained Solar Bahamut, we need to first refresh our memory on how primals work and how summoners obtain them. In the simplest of terms, primals are created by two things: a lot of ether and the belief in that thing's existence. You heard me correctly. These two things are the only necessary components for a primal's creation. The copious amounts of ether help to provide the primal form, but your belief in that thing helps to give it shape. And no, that does not mean that primals are suddenly made of dynamis. Ether has been reacting to your thoughts, feelings, and emotions long before Endwalker was released. And that didn't suddenly change. Ether still reacts to your emotions and prayers. It's the entire reason Dark Knight exists, and why primals are so easily influenced by the thoughts of those who create them. In theory, you could make a primal for anything. A primal for wolves, a primal for festivals, a primal of rivers, and so on and so forth. Sure, we most commonly see them being summoned by people like beast tribes, but that's because they already collectively agree on what their supposed god would look like or how they would act. For example, the Sylph all view Ramuh as a patient and wise old man, with the power to destroy all in his wake with ferocious lightning. As such, that's how he appears and how he behaves. In fact, it's asserted that Ramuh is a primal made in the image of Rhalgr, god of destruction, and even he comments on this not being a coincidence. In theory, you could make a primal from anything, and if the similarities between Ramuh and Rhalgr are anything to go by, the primal can ultimately look vastly different from what inspired its creation. The same thing happened with Saint Shiva. She looks nothing like the primal inspired by her, and yet she still served as the fundamental idea behind it. And if that's not enough of an explanation for you, well, we can use the entirety of the Eden Raid primals and how they turned out. But that's the point. Even if you're trying to make a primal in someone or something's image, odds are it'll fundamentally have some similarities, but will ultimately look vastly different from the original concept. This is because different thoughts, feelings, and desires will interact with and ultimately shape the ether that creates the primal in different ways. Which finally brings us to Bahamut himself. Tell me, do you know what the original Bahamut looks like? Because we do in fact have a modest image of him. Back when the first Encyclopedia Eorzea was released, we were given an image of Midgardsormr and his 7 children. Indeed, we've known what all the members of the first brood looked like for many years now, and here is Bahamut, the real Bahamut. Personally, I think he stands out rather well with his apparently golden scales and intricate backward-facing horns. Before his death, many different people and cultures had given him many titles. Eldest child of the first brood, Lord of Mericidia. He was even called the Dawntrail. And even though this isn't a complete image of him, we can clearly see that his primal, lunar, and solar appearances look nothing like the original, which, in all honesty, is consistent with what we've already discussed so far. So, as the story goes, Bahamut was slain by the Elegant Empire during their invasion of Mericidia. Tiamat, as well as many other Mericidian dragons, were consumed by grief, so much so that Tiamat was fooled into performing a primal summoning to bring Bahamut back. Instead, what she created was the primal Bahamut that we are all familiar with. Then the Allagans used Omega to capture and contain this new primal, stuffed him into Dalamud, and well, you know the rest. We wouldn't get another iteration of this look until Lunar Bahamut, and thankfully, the explanation for how lunar summons were created is rather straightforward. I quote, "The manifestation of the Elder Primal is believed to have been called forth by Mericidian dragons held captive within one of the Telophoroid's mysterious towers. Due to the altered state of mind of those forced to perform in the summoning, its appearance differs greatly from the Bahamut that brought about the 7th umbral calamity." End quote. Lunar Bahamut, or rather all lunar primals, were made this way. They weren't as powerful as the primals that they were made to impersonate, but they could be forcibly created over and over as needed, so long as the Telophoroid towers had their prisoners. Through the lunar primals, we're reminded just how easily some differing thoughts or an unhealthy mind affects the creation of a primal. Lunar Bahamut may have the same shape as the Elder Primal, but its form is twisted, almost sickly looking as jagged horns stick out of its body like malignant growths. It's quite literally the twisted minds of the captured dragons made manifest. Which finally brings me to the discussion that all this setup has been setting the stage for. Solar Bahamut, and how Summoner suddenly has access to it. When a Summoner creates an eggy, demi, or any kind of primal-inspired creature, it's done so with the Summoner's exposure to that primal's unique ethereal signature. Think of it like a unique code that only that primal can produce. Once a summoner exposes themselves to that code within battle or by being around that primal long enough, the summoner has the chance to try to create eggies and demis in that primal's image. The Warrior of Light was there when the 7th umbral calamity happened, exposing them to Bahamut's unique ether as the Elder Primal rampaged across Eorzea. Thusly, the Warrior of Light can summon them, or rather, create entities within the Elder Primal's image. And yet, you never saw or fought Solar Bahamut. And with no new job quests to explain how you obtained this unique summon, it begs the question, what is it, and how did you conjure it? Just like its Elder and Lunar counterparts, Solar Bahamut looks nothing like the original dragon, so we can easily put to bed any connection to the Dawn Wyrm. While it may be true that we've never seen it, and that it isn't inspired by the true Bahamut, it clearly looks like a deviation of the original Elder Primal, just like Lunar Bahamut. Indeed, my friends, while I have no clear citation proving this, I believe there is very strong evidence that the creation of Solar Bahamut is the antithesis of how Lunar Bahamut was created. Remember, Lunar Bahamut gained its twisted form and sickly appearance from the altered state of mind induced by the Telophorois Towers. So, if Lunar Primals were created by a twisted mind, then it stands to reason that a focused or disciplined mind could create a similar effect. Oh yes, the one who created Solar Bahamut wasn't some side quest or soulstone ability. It was you. You, the Warrior of Light, willfully created this entity. Now, some players might buckle at this thought, saying things like they would never want to create something like this, much less make it their most recent summoner spell. But we have to remember, for as much freedom of expression Final Fantasy XIV gives its players, the Warrior of Light is ultimately their own person, and aspects of their true thoughts and personality seep through the cracks now and then. While it doesn't happen all the time, there are some cutscenes where the Warrior of Light clearly isn't happy with something, regardless of what dialogue options you choose. Certain side quests or cutscenes will always play out the same way for all players, because ultimately that's how the Warrior of Light would have settled those events. And Solar Bahamut certainly isn't the first time the Warrior of Light has proven to add their own flavor to how a job plays within this MMO. Take Machinist for example. The Machinist Soul Crystal is blank, and as such, you've no specific mentor or tradition to follow when improving upon this job. In fact, it's future machinists who will be learning from you. So tell me, who told you to start doing backflips with a ranged weapon? That's right, every time you do one of those crazy flips on Machinist, that's the Warrior of Light choosing to be extra. At no point in the Machinist job quest did the characters suddenly encourage you to do acrobatics while aiming your weapon. Your Warrior of Light is choosing to do this. So, if the Warrior of Light created Solar Bahamut, the question then becomes when, or more importantly, how? As I stated earlier, Ether will react very carefully sometimes to how you think and feel. Thus, the creation of Solar Bahamut is likely no different. If Lunar Bahamut was created through madness, then Solar Bahamut was likely created through discipline and talent. But not only that, this new form was clearly inspired by something. Or rather, I should say it was inspired by someone. If the light blue glow that Solar Bahamut gives off is familiar, that's because it's the same radiance generated by another primal, Hydaelyn. Remember how I said earlier that a summoner need only expose themselves to a primal's power in order to gain its ethereal code? Well, since you eventually did battle with Hydaelyn, that requirement was indeed satisfied. Though if I'm being honest, it's entirely possible that primals such as Hydaelyn and Zodiark are far too powerful for even the Warrior of Light to create summons of. But if I had to venture a guess, the Warrior of Light discovered a way to weave their understanding of Hydaelyn and Bahamut's ether together into something new. Combining these etheric codes, or at least allowing the influence of Hydaelyn's code to leave an impression upon Bahamut, thus creating Solar Bahamut. And if the light blue glow that they share is not enough to convince you that it's Hydaelyn's influence, then you need only look at the magical symbols created by Solar Bahamut's power, as they are the exact same as Heidelins. Of course, with no new job quests or job lore for me to skim over, I can't say with absolute certainty what's going on here. But now that you've heard my theories and the explanation behind them, I'd like to hear your thoughts. How do you think the Warrior of Light managed to combine aspects of Heidelin and Bahamut together? Would you rather the Warrior of Light had created any other summon instead, like Ramuh or Leviathan? And what do you think the Warrior of Light's creative initiative will mean for jobs in the future? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But, as always, new discoveries like this are what makes the lore of new expansions interesting. I look forward to discussing more of what Dawntrail has taught us in the future. But as always, until next we meet, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy my content, it would mean the world to me if I had earned you as a subscriber. We are currently on the road to 50k, and I'd love to have you as part of that journey. I'd also like to take this time to thank my amazing Patreon supporters: Nanama, Amina Viltaria, Slippers, Ozkan Hawk, Naria O'Meara, Potato, Seth Rosewood, and Sinalv Bagel. Your support has always meant so much to me and helps to keep the content flowing with ease. If you're interested, there are additional links down in the description to my Discord, X, and other things as well. But until I see you again, I hope you're having an amazing day. Class dismissed.